Hello, everybody. This is Robert at Prophecy Spotlight. A few years ago, I read an article on the will of Peter the Great, the Russian Tsar. And this has greatly helped me to understand a little bit of prophecy, especially understanding the pathway that Russia has now undertaken. So I've had these videos in my mind for a long time. I wanted to do it early January, but I had many things to do. So here we go now. We're going to go to Peter the Great, his last will. So it is, I would call that editor's column. I seldom do that. Matter of fact, I think I never did. But it's going to be part one. These are going to be two parts. The first one is uh, the pathway that Russia is following after reading Peter the Great's will. And the second part would be the prophetic way of looking at things. So we go with the first part. I just want to get my, just get this, my pointer option there. There we go. All right. Peter the Great, 1672 to 1725. His last testament, a pattern for Mr. Putin, the Tsar of Russia. Okay. Now, Peter the Great, in his days, he was always looking towards the West. And what I call the West is Europe style. Okay. What they were doing in France, in England, and things like that. And Peter really liked to go to a place called Domaine de Versailles, where these big parties were happening. He just loved it, he just loved going there. He loved the French culture. He loved the West, the way of doing things and so forth. So that was his attraction. Okay, that was his attraction. Now, the way Peter reasoned was the following. He was looking west, looking at Europe, and they had all these things. They had the railway stations. They were far advanced compared to Russia, which was still way back in their way of doing things. So he was looking at that, and he was looking at their free lifestyle, and the moral of the Domaine Versailles attracted him. There was always party, indulgence, and so forth. But that was one of his attractions. But the railway system really, the development of the West compared to Russia really interested him. After several visits to Europe, he formed his mind. Now, what I'm telling you about looking westward, I can understand that because in my youth, I traveled quite a bit, and I was almost a year in Asia and just traveling. And once I got to Turkey, you see, once you leave Europe, you take Europe as something, but it's nothing compared than when you crossed over to Istanbul. There you get the East. And I was so impressed by the East. I was like, what's his name? Alexander the Great. He never came back. He was so impressed, eh? And Alexander the Great, what he wanted to do, he married a princess from the East, and they wanted to join together the West and the East. But that didn't work out. But anyways, the thing is, I was impressed once you travel to the East. And the reason I'm saying that is that in those days, what would I say? In those days, the Turkish people, especially those around Istanbul, they were interested, they were looking west. They were interested in these things. They wanted to, they, they're, they just wanted to go west. They wanted to do the West style things. And then after a few years, well, maybe around the 80s, maybe the 90s, most likely the 90s, they turned completely east. Okay? Uh, they, they took over what they call the Sharia law, the Muslim way of doing things, and so they never looked back to the West. But there was a time they were. Okay, same thing as Peter the Great. Now, the noblesse of the European style had an imprint on Peter the Great. It touched him, you know. So here we see Peter the Great there. So the lifestyle of Europe was being tinted on him, if I could say. So even at St. Petersburg, the evenings um, were held in the European style. Some of them were, some nights they were even held in French. Just imagine in St. Petersburg, a party in French. Anyways, that's what it is here. He really looked west and he loved the West. Now, later in his life, there was a turning point. In his latter days, there was a turning point. Okay, this is where, let me illustrate with a personal understanding. This is where I'm relating to Turkey, where I was in Turkey, you know, and the Turkish people were looking west. Clearly, that was the avenue of many. So the question was asked, will the balance turn towards west? It did not turn towards west. You know, the balance changed. It went east, completely east. Their roots was more eastern than western. The Shara law came and the women started to cover their face, see, in the 90s. I recall saying to myself, they have chosen or they chose the East. I remember that when all these newspapers came about in Turkey and so forth, I remember saying, all right, they decided, they turned East. Now, since then, the President Erdogan wants to mobilize the East to be under Turkey leadership. He, he wants to recreate what we call the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. He says that all these lands that were once theirs should be again theirs. So the Ottoman empires should be under the headship of Turkey again. So that's being done right now. This is what is playing right now. And he's trying to round up people with his mindset. Now, before Peter, the Tsar of Russia, died, he had asked himself this question. How can Russia be great again? Huh? Like Mr. Trump, how to make America great again? Well, the Tsar said to himself, how can I make Russia a great power? Not again, but just a great power. So he looked around, and what did he see? He saw a small, small island called England. There's England right now. It's a small island. This is what he saw, this small island. Now, nations and nations were under the control of this small island. India, Egypt, Australia. It was so powerful, it was almost what we call an empire, but it was not it was just a powerful nation. Okay? And so he looked at this island and he said, how can a small island like England be so powerful? Eureka, he said, I got it, I got it. It's because of its marine fleet, because of its ships. It can go anywhere, it can control everywhere because they have ships and ships. So he said to himself, so from that starting point, that England controlled a lot of nations because it was a maritime power, he wrote his last will to Russia, or for Russia, for the followers that would come forward after him. So here is a summary of his will. Not too many people are aware of that, but you will find out that it is very, very revealing. So what he says is that those that come after me, the followers, my successors, should follow this guideline to acquire universal dominion. So that's the background. Universal dominion. Russia wants universal dominion. And this is the way Peter the Great taught how to do it. Just watch carefully. 1. Russia needs to build a large fleet for marine forces. So we need ships. We need 2 big ships. So that's the first point. Make sure in the future that you spend a lot of budget on building ships, submarines, and things like that. Now, the second point, since Russia is like landlocked as such, she needs to occupy territory where there are seaports. So she can travel in the different avenues given by the great seas. So a marine force, now we need seaports. We need to go to the north. So they went to Sweden and Norway, around there, and they got a seaport there. But they didn't have any in the south. Okay, getting there. They need to look north. He said, you look north, find a seaport. They did. Look south and find a seaport there. Coming. Here we go. There's Russia. Okay. And there's the Dead Sea right here. Dead Sea right here. You see, in the north, they had some here, but nothing in the south. Nothing in the south. Look at that. Nothing in the south. So here we go. Now we see Russia is here and Ukraine is there. And this is the Black Sea. Now through the Black Sea, you can go through here and you can either go towards the Suez Canal that would lead you to the Mediterranean Sea, or you can go south and go to the Indian Sea that will bring you eventually to the Pacific Sea. So you can have access to the Atlantic and through the Pacific only if you have seaport. Okay? I think you're starting to see the picture. Now, next on his will, always keep the Russian nation in constant warfare. You know, keep them active. Keep the soldiers in alert. Don't let them become lazy. Just keep them moving all the time. This is how you maintain a military force. In time of peace, when there is no war, replenish your finances. You know, try to lay aside money. So time of peace, you don't spend that much. So try to work in a way that you can save some money and try to build up a military budget or military treasury if you want. Now, number 4. From the civilized nations of Europe, try to draw to yourselves learned men that know a lot of things like sea captains. Try to get these knowledgeable people, these learned men of Europe, try to get them and take advantage of all their knowledge. This will be helpful to you. Number 5. Now, what Russia needs to do, it needs to mingle with surrounding nations. Mingle and raise disorder and jealousies. Stir up discord. Make one country against another. And make them to be jealous of each other. And then when they are weak, just take them. Huh? Seek alliance with England to learn commerce and acquire navigation skills. Like I was saying, raise quarrels, number 7, between neighboring countries, and they will ruin themselves. Then come in and just take them. This is what Russia is exactly doing today. It is mingling, but not in a good way. And he said, this is how you will win Europe, and you will have universal, eventually, Russia will have universal dominion. Here is a checkmate, the checkmate plan of Peter the Great in action. Okay, whatever Peter the Great said, Mr. Putin is exactly doing the same thing. This is his backdrop plan, as it were. Do what Peter the Great did. So Mr. Putin has really now a good, what they call, a good maritime power. I think they have one more submarine than USA. But they have now these ships, and they have now this seaport at the north. And they want access to the south now. They have a little bit, they had in the years 80, they did take something in the south, but they want a better place, you know. So Russia's presence right now has been in Liban, has been in Iran, has been in Syria, has been in Turkey. So Russia is mingling with all these countries, right? And they are now very close to Israel themselves. They are there everywhere, and they provide money, they provide ammunition, they provide techniques, and so forth. So they are really they're just playing with these countries and using them for their self agrandissement, to become bigger and better. So what do you think will happen to Ukraine? That's the latest newspaper things. What do you think will happen to Ukraine? So there's Ukraine right now. Ukraine, okay? And this is the south. What beautiful seaports you could put there, you know? Originally, they took Crimea, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know. They took a portion of it. Now they want this portion. More and more they want this portion. And you can see there the armies are just lined up everywhere. People say there is as much as almost 200,000 troops there. And they're just waiting. Will Russia invade Ukraine? That is the question. That is the question. So it's a political gamble. To invade Ukraine, Mr. Putin can put himself at risk. Now, will he take that risk? Will he take that gamble to take over Ukraine as he desires? And as he says, it was Russia before, it should be ours again. Now, he's a little bit careful, but wait. What happens? Just imagine that. What happens if he acted jointly with China? Not only jointly, but at the same period, at the same date. You know that China, they want Taiwan, they want Hong Kong. Russia wants Ukraine. Who can resist them? Who can resist them? Maybe one at a time. The United States can come in, but both of them together acting, something else. So if Ukraine is taken by Russia and Taiwan, Hong Kong by China, what do you think will happen? And there's going to be a second part to this. I'm going to do another day. Now look at this picture. Who could stop these simultaneous concurrent military power. Now, if Mr. Putin and the Chinese leader, if they could together do their own will, who could resist them? Who could stand up and say, stop, this is enough? We don't know what is before us. We do not know what is before us. But we need to go to prophecy. Yeah, we'll need to go to prophecy to get some answers. And this is the second part. I only gave the will of Peter the Great as a pathway that Mr. Putin is already following. His mindset is he has his ways trained that way to conquer and be a world imperial power. And if he cannot do it by himself, he might stimulate a union or a contract with China to invade at the same period at the same time. We don't know. We don't know. This is pure speculation, but it is there. This is there. So I leave you with that, and I trust this is helpful in understanding the politics of today, especially Russia. And the next video, we're going to go to Ezekiel 38 and so forth, and look at that a little bit more on a different avenue, a different view, if you want. Okay? But it is always from the Word of God that we get our teaching. It is not by speculation. Okay, it is not by it is by looking to the Word of God. So I trust the next video will bring us to this stage. So until then, may the Lord help you, keep you, and the Lord is coming pretty soon, beloved. So have a good day.